As Far as Anyone Knows is a mostly Latino history podcast where each week your hosts, Minerva Angeles
and Fredo B,
take turns sharing some Latino history,
bad jokes,
and ancestral love. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of As Far as Anyone Knows. I'm your host, Minerva Angeles.
And I'm Fredo B.
And we're here to tell you some stories. This week, we continue our celebration of Black history in Latino America with a very, very important story, a very important person near and dear to my heart. I'm sharing a story of someone from the Dominican Republic, and I happen to be a descendant of the Dominican Republic. So there's a lot of pressure here today, but I'm really excited to tell you guys about Mama Tingo. And before we get to this glorious queen, Fredo, do you have anything you want to share this week?
So it's February. It's the dead of winter. It's been really cold here in the Northeast. We've been getting piled on with the snow. And I gotta say, as much as I love winter, I'm pretty much over it. I'm not sure how you're feeling about it. And that's that I have to stay home. I don't really have to go anywhere. Like I work remotely. The girls stay home with me. But I'm over winter. What say you?
Yeah. I am also not fully over winter, but I am over the constant snow. We did get a little spoiled in the last, I would say 2 years. In the last 2 years, we really haven't gotten a ton of snow. And there's just been a lot of snow. We got that first 2-foot drop. And then we've had on and off snowing. And tonight into tomorrow or something like that. Or no, Monday into Tuesday, it's supposed to rain shards of ice or something. Spears of ice are supposed to come down from the heavens, and it's supposed to be super safe. So I'm not anxious about driving in that at all.
Yeah. We still have a good month and a half left of winter, at least here in the Northeast. Again, I'm talking to people out in the West Coast or down in Texas, talking about oh yeah, I was in the pool the other day. It was 79 degrees, so we just dipped my toe in the pool, and I was like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I don't really.
I'm totally jealous of them. Totally hating.
Yeah, I don't want to hear from nobody who is enjoying brisk 79 degrees.
Who was it? My mother down in Florida talking about oh, it got really cold. It was in the 40s. I'm like, oh, sounds like a great spring day to me. Bring out the light jackets.
That's a spring day in New York.
But with this winter, they especially now, they say, they talk about now it's the season, the whole seasonal affect disorder where people just get more depressed and more lethargic. Do you believe in that kind of science, or do you think it's just white bullshit?
So, yeah, I think that, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not this is in no way a scientific opinion. I think that is something I can understand, being affected by not having enough sunlight and not and being in the dark a lot and having to stay indoors a lot. There are a lot of people that, benefit from sunlight and walking around and getting out and doing things. I don't think that's everybody. I happen to be the kind of person who is a vampire. So I very much enjoy the vampire lifestyle, and it has always worked for me. And I've
always been a recluse.
Yes. I think that there are diagnoses or, common medical terms that, it's funny that you said it's just a white whatever, but they are for white people, and it's not necessarily that we don't experience those things. It's just that we don't have like the luxury of blaming sunlight for being having challenges getting out of bed or not being able to make it to work or something like that. I mean, I have had colleagues at work kind of say that, like, this is just a rough time for me because, of seasonal affect or whatever. And I'm just kind of like, understandable. So, yeah, it's good to be informed that's a challenge that you're having, and that you can like use that personally to remind yourself that this is why you feel like you're lagging or whatever. But you still have to perform, or at least I feel like I I would still have to perform. I don't know that I could
These
say
colleagues, they're white.
that. I had a white man say that to me.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like that is something that, while you're absolutely right, I think I haven't done the study. I haven't read any reports or anything like that, but I do truly believe that is something that black people and people of color, we obviously suffer from depression and the seasonal thing. It might be real, right? I don't know, but it's not a luxury that we get to. It's not something that we get to be diagnosed with. One, and it's not a diagnosis that we would be able to use as a crutch at work. Like I can't just be like, hey, I'm not gonna be performing at the same level because I'm just not really feeling it right now. A little down.
Mm-hmm.
For multiple reasons, right? Because different expectations on us, different social economical situations. Some of us have families.
Yeah. And again, not to downplay the existence of that particular, condition or whatever, because it's, it's a thing. I have friends that are like suffering right now. And say, I mean, for me, it's more anxiety. Like, anxiety is a whole mood. With everything that's been going on, anxiety, like for me, my anxiety is heightened, right? Because of it's already always here, but as a result of some recent changes in our lifestyle, I have a whole bunch of new things to be anxious about, and I have to acclimate to those things. So that adds to the transition for me. So I think I can understand the same itch and whatever to get out for people who need that. Mm-hmm. So, to the point that it's a real thing, that sounds legit to me. What is a struggle, I think, for people of color all the time is when we hear something like this, we know that it doesn't always apply to us.
Yeah.
And I think we are kind of trying to break those barriers within the community, within ourselves. Like, I think a lot of us are trying to talk about mental health and mental wellness within our own family structures and things like that, so that we can try to bring the culture up on this, because our elders have become accustomed to minimizing these things because survival doesn't take into account mental health and wellness. That's not necessarily a huge part of the basic survival stuff. So now that we're starting to push back on all these oppressive systems, we're starting to see how the mental health and wellness is part of the journey. And I think that it's a really great thing that we're doing it. And in line with that, I think we can still carry some of that passed down trauma of having to suppress those things, so that when we do hear things like seasonal affect disorder, we're just like, what? No.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to diminish anybody's experience or struggle. What I really want to highlight is that, these things these are, as you said, these are things that not all of us have the privilege to really own as a struggle for ourselves. We're kind of just, whether it be societal or self-inflicted, we're sort of we're expected to just kind of go on, regardless of how you're feeling. physically, emotionally, you're expected to be on, you're expected to perform. Um, and I think to your point, we all kind of have to sit with that and kind of really look at what we're doing to ourselves. So before you go into your topic that I'm really excited about, because this is a person that I don't even peripherally know. Um, but I just want to give a plug for anybody who has HBO Max. We saw a fantastic movie this weekend that just dropped. It's called Judas and the Black Messiah. It's about the chairman Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, and the plot to assassinate him by the FBI and local police. It is brilliant, is amazing acting, and it's still, unfortunately, still very in the moment. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's all of it is very relevant. I'm not gonna give any spoilers, but
You can't spoil history.
yeah, yes and no, because I was shocked by stuff that was shown. There was stuff I did not know about his assassination that I learned in the scene, and I was absolutely shocked.
Oh yeah,
There
there's
that
direct
was
parallels to like stuff that recent history, right? With
yeah. No,
George
there,
Floyd,
it's
Breonna
nothing.
Taylor. Yeah,
It's nothing short of just murder, cold-blooded murder, and everybody should watch it. These conversations are being had. I think it just takes me to that place, so I have to like kind of try to swim out of here, but I'm getting deeper and deeper in here. But this sort of place where it feels like this endless cycle, and there can be a lot of despair here where I'm sitting right now. It just feels like, with the second impeachment problem, that whole thing not going through, it's just how white supremacy can't hold itself accountable. And there's a lot of stuff that we have to get through. We will continue to see history repeat itself until we hold people accountable. These things will continue to happen until the example is set that this is not acceptable. And unfortunately, we're just not there. And it just makes me really sad. And I know that there's it's important to have hope, and I think relentless hope. I think I had Glennon Doyle. I don't know if anyone knows who Glennon Doyle is. She writes great books. Author of Untamed. She tweeted about relentless hope this weekend as a result of what happened with the impeachment trial decision. Yeah, I think it's important to continue to hope, but I need a minute right now because I'm just kind of like sad.
But so it's important to keep hope, but also we need to know these stories again. The whole point of our podcast, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think that Judas and the Black Messiah is a great example of what Hollywood could do in terms of like telling these stories that are our stories. It was written and directed by a black man, Shaka King. I'm calling it right now, Daniel Kaluuya, who played Fred Hampton. He's going to win an Oscar for this. Okay, so Minerva, let's get into it. Who are we talking about today?
I have the great honor of talking to you all about Mama Tingo today. Mama Tingo was an activist in the Dominican Republic, and she was a farmer or a campesina. And I'm gonna tell you some great information about her. The sources I used were blackpast.org, womensmediacenter.com, and this really great documentary about her. They did like a documentary special on Dominican television. It's in Spanish, but it's on YouTube, so we'll make sure to link it in the episode notes. And then I want to do a quick plug. I have not read this book yet, but I know my cousin got it for her child, and it's a series of Ella Era books by Reinalda Calderon, and she has the Ella Era Mama Tingo book, and it's for kids eight and up, and it's featured there too. I didn't read, just to be clear, I didn't use that book for this research today, but if any of you are interested in sharing stories like this with kids, that is a source that can be used that at the level of 8-year-olds and up. So, Florinda Soriano Munoz was born on November 8th in 1921 in Villamella, Dominican Republic. And just to be clear, Villamella has a ton of history, like just general black history in the Dominican Republic, sort of a center for black culture. And
Villamella?
Mm-hmm.
For context, where is that on the island?
So it's on the southern part of the island, not too far from Boca Chica.
Okay.
If anyone's ever been to Boca Chica. And if I'm not mistaken, there's some history there with Villamella that some of the community moved over to the Haiti side of the island. So I'll probably just do a Black history with Dominican Republic and Haiti at one point, and I'll get into that a little bit more in detail. But that's where she was born.
Okay.
She didn't stay there. At the age of 5, young Soriano was orphaned, and she was raised by her grandmother. When she was 30 in 1951, she married a farmer, Felipe Munoz, and was nicknamed Mama Tingo due to her motherly nature. They inherited her father-in-law's small land plot and began farming for herself in the Hato Viejo region of the Dominican Republic. She and Felipe had children. This is funny because some of the sources that I read said she had 1 child, and then the documentary said that she had 7. So I'm going to lean into the documentary because one of her grandchildren was in it.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're going to go with
accounts.
We're going to go with that source. Yeah. And this is, I know I kind of geek out a little bit about research, but I think we are going to start to look at down the road creating resources for you all to understand how to research and stuff, because it is important to look at multiple resources, especially when it comes to underrepresented people and underrepresented stories. You want to make sure you have as many resources as possible because you're trying to look for credibility in the sources that you're looking at.
Sometimes it's to put the pieces together too, right? So it could be, I'm not sure with Mama Tingo, but could be that she had 1 child but then adopted 6.
Right.
Who knows?
No, yeah, it's possible. Yeah. So in this documentary, she is referred to as brave by almost every person interviewed, which I just thought was absolutely beautiful. Like the word valiente must have came out, I don't even know, like 50 times in this documentary. She's referred to as a hard worker by others, and they used to call her la leña pal horno, which meant like sort of, I guess, the fire to the oven. After her husband died, she kept working the fields on her own. She was known to bring her own children to protests, and she was seen as an attentive mother, and we'll talk about the protests that she ends up taking them to in a second. She involved youth chapters of the movements that she was in these in protests and in meetings. She was very connected with like young people, or it's something that I think I find myself connected to young people too, and trying to kind of keep learnings alive and keep history alive, and getting young people wrapped into what you're doing and having them interested in what you're doing creates that. And so I think she had a deep understanding of passing down these kinds of roots, and so she knew to get the kids involved in the agriculture and the activism that she was doing. So she was a farmer, but she also owned a colmado, like sort of just where she was able to sell some of these the meats that she had from the farm animals. She sold fruits, and she also sold leña or firewood to bakeries. In the documentary, her grandchild he reflected on her trips to sell firewood to the bakeries. He said she would take lemons with her and sell them on her trip. Then she would use what she earned with the lemons to buy him and his brother toy cars and stuff. And I just, I like those little anecdotes because it teaches you a lot about the person. And it reminded me a lot about my grandfather because that's exactly the kind of thing my grandfather would do. So I thought that was really sweet. In 1974, Munoz realized that families around her were losing their generational farming land due to a major landowner, Pablo Diaz Hernandez, through illegal land seizures. And he was essentially stealing their land because he had the power to do so.
Did he have like a government title, or was he just some asshole stealing people's land?
Yeah, the second thing.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
He was just going around taking land. So this began a large land dispute. Throughout the land dispute, several young people were injured. One of the farm residents had her ear chopped off. At one point, politicians arrived to the farmland and enclosed it in barbed wire. This led Mama Tingo to become a revolutionary and a symbol of activism. Mama Tingo joined the Federation of Christian Agriculture Leagues, La Liga Agraria Cristiana, shortly after the land seizures began in 1974. She soon emerged as the group's leader, organizing and speaking at farmer protest rallies. Mama Tingo and her husband even went to then President Balaguer, one of Trujillo's proteges. So we should stop here for a second to talk about that. So Balaguer was the legitimate president at this time. During Trujillo, will most definitely be doing an entire episode on Trujillo at some point. I just have to muster up the courage to
I was wondering how long it would take for us to get to, or at least mention his name.
He gets me so angry.
7 episodes. That's,
I made it 7 episodes without telling everybody I hate Trujillo. He's just like god-awful dictator, and he was incredibly racist and incredibly abusive, and the reason why so many people died. He has a lot of blood on his hands. Balaguer happened to be someone who was sort of part of his squad. They rolled with him, and years, even after he died, because of the immense oppression and how things roll in politics, he was elected into a presidency. So this was happening during Balaguer's second term. So just with this in mind, we know that the way he operates, Balaguer, it's definitely corrupt. It's not with the best interest of the people. It's definitely racist, and it's not necessarily a clean transaction when you're dealing with this guy. And I just...
So Trump.
I don't know if I would say he was Trump. That's because Trump is his own thing. But I know that as a child, I went to DR every summer my whole life until I was like 12 years old. And so I grew up there sort of in some ways. And all I ever heard were Balaguer jokes. Like that's just all I ever heard. There were a lot of jokes about how he was trash, but it's just so interesting how he was just in power for so long.
For a very long time.
And so many people thought he was trash. And I'm just like, so things don't add up here.
Like
Let's
decades,
talk about how corrupt this is. Decades, several decades.
Yeah.
I'll get the dates exactly for how long he was president, but it's not really exactly relevant to Mama Tingo's story in terms of like how long he was there after, but this was his second term in the time that we're speaking about with Mama Tingo. So she did go to see him and asked to fight on behalf of all the hundreds of families. And he promised to fairly distribute the land among the 350 families living on it. And you guessed it, he did not stay true to his word. Yeah, that sounds surprising, but he did not stay true to his word.
But what gave him the right to just take people's land?
This guy?
Yeah.
Pablo Diaz Hernandez.
Yeah.
He was
He was just a stooge of Balaguer.
he was just a rich person who wanted that farmland. He wanted to make that into a larger farm
Sounds
for
about
himself.
white.
Yeah. So the Dominican Republic government deemed these protests now illegal as she continued to protest, right? And they organized efforts to discredit Mama Tingo as a radical, dark-skinned Dominican with no formal education or steady income. And the truth is, she didn't really have a formal education. But one of the things that was striking, and I always just, again, find really inspiring about people like her in the documentary, yeah, everybody's just going on and on about how she didn't ever go to school and how well she was able to articulate herself and get through explaining what the concerns were and what the needs are of what's going on. So I think there's like a huge credit to somebody like her who was a business owner, and there's definitely plenty of ways you can learn how to communicate and how to manage certain types of conversations, especially if you have had certain experiences that align with that. So she has to manage this business. She has to manage multiple legs of the business and traveling and going to different parts of the country to make sure that she can continue these relationships. That requires skills and communication skills. And I think we underestimate sometimes people working in agriculture or people working, in the campos or whatever, and you think that they don't know certain things, but there's actually a ton of skills that are connected to that. And this is all part of propaganda of how we sell these ideas about people to perpetuate oppression, and like people like Pablo Diaz Hernandez, who can just think he can literally bulldoze through a community to take people's land.
Yeah, I think this is awesome. So she was married, right? That's, you said she was married and had anywhere between 1 to 7 children.
It was 7. It had to be 7.
Okay, but it was interesting. So she was the one doing the traveling and doing so she was like the face of the company. I'm assuming her husband was doing like the hard labor.
So her husband at some point did pass away.
Oh, okay.
But not super before this. I don't know how long before this had happened, because at some point he was involved in the advocacy work because he had gone with her. It was reported that he had gone with her to Balaguer the first time, but she did go a second time to Balaguer, which I'll tell you about in a second. And he was not with her the second time she went because by then he had already passed away. So I think that there was a general time where they were co-leading the business, and that once he passed away, it was a pretty smooth transition for her, and she just kept making sure that land was tended to. And that was one thing that they referred to also in the documentary, where they said, even after he passed away, she was out there doing her thing and making sure that the business continued and that the farm was working at the same capacity. So a month before her death, she attempted to speak with Balaguer again and was met with military security and denied access. So the protests continued even after that, and the government finally granted her a court hearing to present her land complaints. Hernandez, who claimed the land was his, destroyed the land of the campesinos with bulldozers and the protection of armed men. Still, the farm workers fought back, and over a dozen of them, including Mama Tingo, were arrested before the conflict was ultimately handled in court. So at some point they get out of jail and are able to make it to this court hearing. So on the day of the court hearing, this is November 1st, 1974. So this is all going on within the same year. A lot of stuff is all the protests, everything's happening in 1974. It's all pretty much happening very quickly. Mama Tingo received news that her pigs got out of where they had been tied up. And so she rushed back to catch them. However, Pablo Diaz Hernandez had hired someone else named Ernesto Diaz to assassinate her. And when she returned home, he was there, and she fought him with a machete, actually, the machete. It's hard for me to say machete. I can say machete very easily. But I have to remember.
So she fought him. She was the one wielding the machete.
Yeah, that was her machete.
Okay.
And, it's just kind of a thing you keep in your car,
I mean, if you're a farmer.
If you're a farmer, you just roll with a machete.
Listen, I wasn't a farmer, but we had a machete in the house.
It's because it's passed down. Yeah. It's like a passed down understanding. Like, this is a required tool to have, right?
Yeah.
So she did attempt to fight him off with the machete, but he fired his shotgun and he killed her. I understand it's once to the abdomen, and she still kept fighting, and then he shot her in the head. And that is the shot, I think, that was fatal. She was 52 at the time of her death. They attempted to go and search for this guy, Ernesto Diaz, and they did not find him. And then I think he did sort of resurface at some point, but, in line with what I said a few minutes ago, he was not held accountable, which is unfortunate. In response to the national and international outcry over her murder, the Dominican government was forced to return the land that Pablo Diaz Hernandez had seized to more than 300 impoverished farmers. And she won in death what she had struggled for in her protests. Mama Tingo is now remembered as a symbol of activism and freedom for the Dominican people. She is honored by a statue in Santo Domingo Plaza, town of Monte Plata. Merengues have been written in her memory. Johnny Ventura is actually one of the artists that sang a song about her. And he was actually in the documentary. If any of you are Johnny Ventura merengue, the merenguero fan, he's in there, and you will fangirl similarly to the way that I did when I saw that he was featured. And obviously, they saw him as like the right person to do that because he was well versed in her story, also saw her as a hero, and was so inspired by her that, he helped produce and then actually recorded a song about her.
So you think that the Dominican government would have learned their lessons with the Mirabal sisters that, brutally murdering a woman activist, is not going to work out in your favor.
Yeah.
So
they're referred to a couple times in various of the resources that I've looked at. So it's interesting because you're right in that they definitely should have learned their lesson with just the way that, femicide, right? Because we know that this is a problem in the Dominican Republic. I think it was David Ortiz that had talked about it recently, and this was not 5 years ago, I think. And I'm not even a baseball fan, and I was like, oh, look at that. What do they call him? Big Papi? Yeah. I was like supporting it because I was like, oh, great. Like, I can't believe he's talking about this. This is fantastic. Like, this is what we need our men to be doing. And I thought it was great. But, this is a historic problem. And obviously they didn't learn from it the first time. And I definitely think that there's something to be said here about her blackness and how that plays into it, about her economic status. I think that has a huge role in it as well. And about her education. All of those things inform how, culturally she has been looked at, and how I think in the time they perceived that everyone else internationally and nationally would respond. And it turns out not well. So, right back at you. Want to make sure that we are clear that there is a ton of anti-blackness and classism in the Dominican Republic, as there is anywhere. In the Dominican Republic, it's a little, it's uniquely messed up because so many Dominican people are black that some of it is like, it's so deeply ingrained in the fiber of the culture that it'll have people looking at themselves and not really fully aware of who they are, or even, there so many of us are Afro-descendant, and not necessarily even being respectful of your ancestors when you kind of participate in some of this stuff. So, I mean, a lot of the articles get into that. It's likely that Mama Tingo isn't widely celebrated in the Dominican Republic because of deeply cultural embedded anti-blackness and classism, which brings into question how comfortable we are with being led by people with informal education or black women. What does it say about community movements if the celebrated leaders are all easy to digest characters of respectability and excellence? Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good kind of question to ask.
Yeah.
Who are you following, and how easy is it for you to follow this person? And I think I hope that we're starting to get closer to a place where we're questioning these things in ourselves. I try as much as possible, if I see something on social media that questions anything in like Latinidad or whatever, or anything in my own understanding of the world, and if I find myself getting frustrated or like defensive, I just ask myself why, and then I keep asking myself what about that is frustrating me or bothering me until I get to the bottom of it. Because most of the time, when I figure it out, it's almost always white supremacist delusion that I didn't know lived there in that section of my life. And and it's good because it's kind of like I just dug deep somewhere and pulled it out of something I didn't even know it was in. Yeah. And it's such a healthy practice. And it wasn't it like when I finish doing it, every time it happens, when I finish, I'm like, that wasn't personal at all. That wasn't about me. That is about a thing I thought I understood, and then I connected it to myself. But that's not about me. Mm-hmm. That is an idea that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's an incredible question to ask in terms of why haven't I heard of Mama Tingo before, right? Like, I've heard all about the Mirabal sisters and a couple of other national heroes. But it sounds like Mama Tingo should be up there with her. Obviously, she's well regarded. She has a statue and all that. But in terms of like her legacy and continued story being told, it's not as widespread.
No.
So, you kind of have to kind of look at where and why and how,
Yeah. And she's like so bad. She fought this dude with a machete.
Yo, I'm just picturing this 52-year-old woman, badass, again, just fighting this dude off with a machete, and I'm sure she almost won.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, where's my Mama Tingo movie? I need this movie. I need an action-packed, like, Mama Tingo movie with a full machete fight scene. That's what I need.
Hollywood, feel free to make that movie. Please make sure you cast a dark-skinned woman.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Please cast it. Like, we're going to post pictures of Mama Tingo. She was very dark. And I'll say that I was very strategic in my choices for Black History Month. I think, I'll obviously, anybody who identifies as Black or experiences the world as a Black woman was going to get highlighted for me, but it was important to me to make sure that we were using this opportunity to amplify women that were probably not going to get a lot of light, and that's usually the darker skinned Black women. Mm-hmm. So we want to, like, even in these kinds of like little things, like, yeah, no, it is I guess enough to just be thinking about, bringing up Black women or Black people that are Latino. But I think, let's keep taking it a step further. And like, I like to ask myself, is this a whitewashed version of what I'm trying to do? Yeah. Because it lives in me. It lives in me like it lives in everybody else. You have to ask yourself this question. And I don't experience the world as a Black woman. I might be Afro-descendant and I might have a lot of experiences understanding, like interacting with Black women and understanding some of those experiences, but I don't have them. So I can understand them, but I don't know them that way because they're not my experiences. So there's a reason why Mama Tingo isn't shown as much as the Mirabal sisters. You know, Minerva Mirabal. All they talked about was how beautiful she was and blah blah blah. Right? Is that how we would describe somebody like Mama Tingo? And nobody did. So I think that why does she have to fit some kind of beauty standard to be a hero? She absolutely does not.
But the same way, same token, the flip side, why do we have to sexualize Minerva in that way?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. We're not talking about her though right now.
No,
we're talking about Mama Tingo.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I want to make sure we give the space to Mama Tingo. But
center it right back on Blackness. Thank
you. Because I want to be clear. Like that is, I think everything that the Mariposas did, was absolutely amazing. And, we'll talk about them another day because that's a whole different, I have an emotional attachment to them in many different ways. And I felt a lot of anxiety preparing for you all today about Mama Tingo because this is my history too. And why didn't I know about her? Why did I find this out? Because I had to research like a woman, a Black woman in the Dominican Republic with this kind of history.
How did you come across Mama Tingo? Were you just Googling Black women DR?
No, well, I mean, I kind of always heard the name, but I didn't know who she was. Like it pops up here and there.
I mean, there's the merengue. Well,
yeah, but it wasn't really. Yeah, well, the merengue probably. I can't say that I remember the merengue as a child. I can say that it came up here and there. I think it was when the book came out, and that Dominican writers on Instagram. That's an Instagram account, by the way. If you're into that, definitely hit up Dominican writers, and just these are various like Afro Latino accounts were like resharing it. So it had kind of popped up at my peripherals, I think sometime in 2019, I think when that book came out. And it wasn't until, recently when we were preparing for the podcast that I looked into her story in depth the way that I did.
Mm-hmm. And what exactly, I mean, obviously besides her being badass, but like what, there are so many badass Black women. What drew you to this particular story?
I think it was the underrepresented stories of campesinos that was a draw for me.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even within my family, like there are parts of my family that are highlighted because of people who have certain professions that are revered. The doctor, the lawyer, the kind of whatever. And then there's a ton of my family who has background in agriculture, and that we have just completely moved away from that. I don't think there's anybody. I think I have one family, no, two uncles left that are in agriculture, where historically that was a larger group of people. We're like getting ready to get rid of land that is like of agricultural value. So some of that's my history, and it makes me sad that it's not looked at as prosperous.
Yeah. I mean, that's a larger societal issue, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we tend to look down on those who really are. When we, essential worker came up a lot this past year, right, during the pandemic. But when we're talking about like really essential, like food is essential. Like I'm not talking about people who pack it in at the restaurant. Well, that's we need them too. We're talking about from the people who pick them from the ground,
Mm-hmm.
who plant them,
Mm-hmm.
and that stuff is like not regarded as highly, as you said, as doctors, lawyers, all these other professions that you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to kind of in the hopes that you recoup it back in your salary, right?
It's true.
But there's people doing back-breaking labor that just go underappreciated. Many of them, or most of them, all of them, being indigenous and Black.
Yeah, and that's one thing why I was so inspired by her, because she, there was no systematic reason why she should have had the power, confidence, and resources to perform the activism at the level that she did. And she did. And so I'm just, I'm incredibly inspired by her. I'm so glad that I have her as an ancestor. And I just think, we should all know about her. So I will end on this last quote that she is known to have said, and is also actually quoted in the Johnny Ventura song, which I did find on Apple Music, so I'm pretty sure you can find it anywhere. La tierra es de quien siembra, por eso esta tierra es mía. The land belongs to who sows it, and this land is mine. And, that's just a wonderful quote, I think, to leave us with. So that's all for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
I'm Fredo B. Thanks.
Minerva Angeles, and we'll see you next time. Ha-home. See you soon. Follow us on social media. You can follow our podcast at AFAKPod. That's at AFAAK Pod. Or follow our hosts, Minerva at It's Minerva Angel and at Fredo_B on Twitter.